excited to get the space and have the opportunity to invite you to the space. My name is Jason. I'm part of the BlockApps team. My focus is product and community. So you guys are my focus, basically. Product because the feedback that we receive from the community members and people that use our apps matter a lot. So I'm hoping to make you a part of our extended family. To help us get to the bottom of this, it's my esteemed pleasure to introduce tonight's panel, starting with Michael Sena. Michael is the co-founder and product lead at uPort. uPort is a decentralized identity network built on Ethereum that enables users to privately manage their identity with a mobile wallet. I personally have uPort installed on my iPhone. I think it's just a great example of trying to manage identity in a mobile device. The goal of uPort is to make decentralized systems usable and safe for mainstream audiences. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Shane Vitarana. Shane is a veteran iOS developer responsible for several hugely successful mobile apps. Two of the best examples are DrumKit and the TED app. I used DrumKit when I first, with my first iPhone. It was just a great user experience. I actually felt like I was playing the drums on a little mobile device. Shane was also early at Groupon and Orbitz and believes in the power of blockchains for good. Thanks for being here and sharing your experiences with us. Thank you. Next up, we have Greg Hausheer. Greg is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Lightmatter. Greg and his team build mobile, desktop, and blockchain applications. Greg started building blockchain apps because his customers asked for it. The demand that he received from his customers made him and his team go out and learn how to build these applications. Actually, one of his colleagues and CTO came to one of our BlockApps training and spent some time with us and tried to understand how to build an enterprise blockchain app and how to deploy smart contracts. So that's where we built this relationship, and we've seen them build their company since then. It's really incredible to hear what you're doing in the mobile space, and we're really grateful to have you. Thank you. And finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Victor Wong. Victor is chairman and co-founder of BlockApps. Victor spearheaded the creation of several mobile applications, including a highly successful English and Chinese language learning application that had over 1 million users in China. An early pioneer in the blockchain space with significant experience building mobile applications, Victor's main focus is increasing blockchain adoption. Greatly appreciate that you accepted this assignment. Thank you, Victor. Thank you for joining us. All right. So with that, let's start this up. I have several questions that are really focused on our topic for today. And I'm going to pose the first question to Shane. By the way, the audience, if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to put your hand up. We're going to have somebody passing around a microphone so that you can join in the conversation and discussion. Okay. Let me put my phone on vibrate, sorry. Okay, so this first question is for Shane. What similarities do you see in the early days of building mobile applications and building applications on the blockchain ecosystem?
All right. Well, yeah, there's a lot. So when the iPhone first launched, you couldn't make any native apps. It was all web apps, right? And right now in the blockchain world, pretty much everything's focused on web and mobile. I mean, but like web-based mobile. But I think in the blockchain space, when you're dealing with money and currency, it kind of helps to have to write apps in Swift or Kotlin. Just because it's safer. So like right now the ecosystem really isn't there, the tools really aren't there, but things are getting better. You know, you have services like Infura, and you can even like run Geth on iPhone now. So things are getting better, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff in common.
Michael, I think you were also pretty early in the iOS/blockchain space. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Not particularly. It just generally, there's not that much tooling. We started out, and as our team was like a small team of a few people, just like messing around with can we can we build identity management into a mobile app? And then our team grew, and we still are stuck with React Native, which makes it hard to do native things. And so we've actually had to rewrite a lot of our JavaScript code in native implementation, just because when you're dealing with private keys in the blockchain, you want to be sure of security. So.
That kind of brings me to a question that I had a little bit later, but let's pull it up and ask it right now. In terms of how you develop mobile apps, would you prefer to build a native application or use an SDK like a Xamarin or a phone app, and why? And I'll just pose that out to whoever wants to answer it first.
I mean, I personally would use a native app, just for the reasons I cited earlier. Yeah, it's just more secure, it's more stable, and it's more performant too, right? So, and also I just think like if you make apps in Swift, if you do it in like a functional way, that really kind of like matches up really well with how blockchain works. And you have like types and stuff like that. It's just so much better.
I think a big answer to that too.
I think you're both going to
Is this working? All right, great. When you're using a service or a tool like React Native and all these other ones out there, you're still going to get problems in the UX and the UI that aren't quite compatible for different browsers that you're using Safari, Chrome, whatever it might be. And going native, you can really tap into the operating system of the device at a layer that you just can't get with the web. So taking advantage of your phone's natural capabilities is really awesome to do that, but also not having to worry about that, so your team can focus on whatever aspect of the blockchain you're working on with your app is really important. So it's kind of like covering your bases and focusing on the upside.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, yeah. Let me pass this mic off to you.
So say you're building a market, like a exchange, and you need all of these like server-side functions and programs to run. Would it be okay to just use like a simple front-end app like Fuse Tools or something, just communicate with the API?
I can take that over. So I think the big issue in mobile blockchain app development is really around credentials and key storage. So, and this is still sort of a broadly unsolved problem, right? So, and everything is, we were just talking about the various trade-offs between usability and security. So you can make something very, very tightly secured to a device, but if you lose that device, which, who hasn't dropped a phone in a toilet or something, left it in the car somewhere, you'd lose your private keys, right? Then you have the problem is that if you make it really usable and really easy to use, then you potentially open it up to security vulnerabilities. So depending, I think right now, we kind of look at every application and we kind of think like, how important with this application is that trade-off? Is it more important, maybe if you're making something like a gaming app, it's really important to have real easy usability in it. And so you're willing to trade off a little bit of security. If you're hiring something where it's primarily like a lot of like you're holding very expensive tokens or high value items, then you probably want to err on the side of security.
Any other questions on that topic? Yep, over here.
Are the challenges the same for designing something on iOS as opposed to Android platform? Like, how is that different? Are the challenges the same?
Yeah, from like a UX UI perspective.
Or just the programs you were mentioning, are those only iOS programs?
So I guess from sort of like a design perspective, what's fascinating about blockchain technology, and I mean, how many people here trade on exchanges? I'm sure a ton. you're starting to see like a lot of, I was expecting more hands.
How many people wishes they
Yeah.
traded on experience?
You're really starting to see the introduction of like these patterns and habits that engineers and designers have to introduce to deal with things like key storage. And if that occurs on a phone, you know, protecting yourself in a way where if you lose your phone, you don't lose everything. So with the types of technologies that are out there now, it goes back to kind of traditional mobile development, right? You can use like a JavaScript library to target both, you know, the iPhone and the Android. You can go native, but then you have to write using different programming languages. So fundamentally, there's not too much of a difference in technology, but some of the new tech that is out there is causing a lot of issues with issues that are specific to blockchain, like key management.
Yeah, so one thing we had to watch out, like if you develop for iOS, like the devices are always the same. Like, you know, you're getting an iPhone and it's only certain types of iPhones. In the Android world, there's tons of devices, right? And in terms of like storing private keys and stuff like that, if you're working on iOS, you know which ones have a secure enclave where you can store private keys. Android phones may not have that. We talked about that earlier too. That's one thing to watch out for.
Yeah, I would just say in my experience, particularly being in China, the wide range of the hardware on Android devices is immense. And it ranges from things like secure enclave to the screens themselves. Like literally in my last company, you know, we had a lineup of iOS devices that, you know, could fit across a table this size. We had 2 full boardroom tables of different Android devices. And like the differences between them were stark. I mean, literally, we were on one device, we would use the color red, and it would be red on one screen, and it would be purple on another screen. And this kind of applies broadly to all the hardware that is on Android. So, and one of the things about the Android ecosystem is that there are, particularly in Asian countries, there are so many more devices than you've ever seen in the States. You know, like it is, you can buy Android devices in China that are $50. And they go all the way up to, you know, more expensive than the iPhone. So you have this huge diversity, but that also poses problems because if you really want to be secure, you're reliant to a certain extent on what hardware is on the device itself. And then how do you degrade that experience if that hardware isn't there? So on iOS, it's much more consistent.
That's a great point. Kind of speaking to the different types of devices, we're also dealing with some different types of users when it comes to the blockchain space than the normal space. Specifically the psyche of these users, and specifically the fact that we're dealing with real money. Can we talk a little bit about what it's like trying to build an application, think about products and features, for a group of users currently that have some very strict ideas about what it is to build and use an application?
It's interesting now too, like all of these things, like we as wallet providers have like an immense power to change, because essentially we're sitting at the middle of this UX paradigm. Like we're sort of the trusted, untrusted middleman of every single digital interaction, and so we have a lot of impact here. But in some ways, like we're still limited by the technology in a lot of ways. Like we're designing systems sort of with the anticipation that this current pattern will end up changing to this pattern, and when that happens, our app will work perfectly. Well, it turns out that, like, you know, not everyone is 100% great at predicting the future, and so like generally, like I find that we try and develop apps and like we build just the minimum viable whatever, and hope that sort of we can maintain that sort of agility and state until things get more solid around us.
Yeah, I was going to add, like, I think usability has a lot of work, but I think it's a huge opportunity too. You know, I mean, if you've looked at any sort of ICO, how to participate has to come with a 6-page PDF. And, you know, like, download GEP, sync it for 2 days, you know, type these commands. And, you know, I just think it's like, if Amazon worked that way, where you went to the website and it said, you know, download this database, type in these SQL commands, no one would use it. So it's really exciting, but also a big challenge that we have to face on how to solve these usability problems, but particularly on mobile, I think.
That's great. I think about some of the things that we as a company deal with. You know, we fight against centralization of information or services, even though centralizing something might make it easier for the user to adopt. And we're hoping that gas price is going to go down eventually once they do proof of stake and things like that. So we're, I think to Michael's point, kind of hoping and wishing for the roadmap to be delivered at a certain time. And we just have to kind of keep our fingers crossed that that occurs in order to make this mobile space work.
There are just so many dependencies. It's just being aware of what they are. I think that's like good management, right? Like, you know, we're not trying to build Uber for dog walking where you can just like literally piece together this app in like 4 hours. We're trying to build something new, and it turns out when you do that, it's hard.
There's no playbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see if we can get some consensus going around here. Oh, do we have a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just hold on your questions, everyone. I'll bring around the mic. It certainly hasn't helped that most of the B2C companies have not enforced any security related, you know, your password should be like this and your password should be like that. Google has let you be very lazy. Amazon has let you be very lazy. They don't have a lot of constraints. But when it comes to this and when it comes to money, they force you. But this problem has been solved to a certain degree in fintech space in terms of trying to shape the user. So let's say if I use my Chase app, I know that initially it was crappy, absolutely crappy when they came out with the first version, but then they kept on shaping the behavior of the user and always doing it, you know, either two-factor notification or anything like that. Are you considering all of those aspects of trying to shape the user behavior so that eventually it would make it a big space? Because I think if you're building it for B2B, everyone is okay with high level of security and whatever pain you can, you know, inflict upon them. But when it comes to B2C and you want like really popular apps, no one is willing to do it. And I was amazed at when Google allowed the security, or even Amazon allowed the security to be like really low grade in terms of at least the password enforcement of what it should be. So any thoughts on that? And do you think it would help if you do the fintech copy paste of the pattern of what they did?
Sure. Yeah. So I agree that people are only able to tolerate so much newness at any single point in time. And so there are a couple of things that we look to do now. It's like sort of you can either use existing metaphors and like sort of relate it to something that people already perceive to be valuable. If you're trying to convey that like this password is valuable and there's no one here to save you if you lose it. And I think, so you try to like go to the place where people already sort of like will mentally get it with the least amount of text descriptor as possible. Because people don't read on apps, it turns out.
Particularly on phones, right? Yeah.
We were like, oh, we developed so much great onboarding like language. It's so perfect, and we were like in our like little hole, like this is the best blockchain user experience. And then we piloted something at a conference in San Francisco, and it was like a real live thing for our app, and people like it obviously didn't work, and people never read anything, and then they didn't save stuff, and we're still dealing with support from that. And so it's like test the UX, because a lot of times, even if you think you're helping by being descriptive, it's like doing the most with the least is the key.
You're really limited with screen real estate on mobile, and so you have to be conscious of every pixel that's on, you know, not every pixel, but in certain, you know, ranges and phases. And whether that means you need to design mobile first and then work your way up to desktop if you're building something that's kind of a hybrid, or if you're just doing mobile, really make sure that you test the UX, and you know, you ain't gonna need it. Like really just think consciously about every element that goes into it, and hopefully with that, I kind of have the back end to support and offer the magic that the user sees on the front end to make things really seamless.
Yeah, I also think one of the challenges is that, you know, most of the B2C apps that you mentioned, security was kind of an afterthought. I mean, Google, Facebook, they didn't even have HTTPS until much later, right? So, but there was a real reason they did that. Their focus was to drive adoption of the technology and make it as frictionless as for the user as possible. But, you know, we have that challenge in the blockchain space. We can't leave it as an afterthought for later. unfortunately, in the enterprise space, where people are used to high-end security, that's not what most standard consumers are used to. So we really have to find that sort of middle ground in between those things.
Do we have any questions? Okay. Oh, one back there. The microphone will get to you. In the meantime.
Oh, it's double duty, Mike.
I'm sorry if I have to ask this, given we're in Microsoft. Are you all using Azure, or if not, what are you using, or does cloud help in any way at all between mobile and blockchain?
I guess I should start on that. I got Mike. So as mentioned before, we launched the category of blockchain as a service with Microsoft, and they've been really, really supportive of our efforts there. And part of that is that, and part of the idea of blockchain as a service is how do you make it really easy for people to start building on top of blockchains as quickly as possible. And so for us, building on clouds, offering that in cloud marketplaces was the first stepping stone to doing that. We do see that there are other integrations, and other cloud providers are starting to move into the space as well. So I think over time, in the sort of greater decentralized picture, we see that there will be different cloud providers playing. Individuals will offer those applications to access, and then other parties will offer services kind of on their own cloud, or kind of abstracting what's happening on clouds like what Infura is doing. So I think we're in the early days of it, and we're going to see a blending of all those different solutions out there.
So we're in the early days. Let's go into the future a little bit. Let's go, let's say, a year out, and blockchain apps are a thing, and they're happening on mobile devices. The difference between mobile and web is that there's a power broker in the middle when it comes to mobile. We're talking about the app stores, iOS, Google Play. What do you guys think about the role that iOS and Google Play are going to play in the adoption? Are they going to be helping or fighting the cause of blockchain apps?
Well, already got kicked out of the Chinese App Store. So I can tell you that certain governments put pressure on some of these app stores because they can. And so I think technically they kicked us out because we are a cryptocurrency wallet, and we could aid in the money, or sort of, I guess, money laundering or the removal of currency from the state. And so they're not messing around with any of this stuff. I've seen others getting around this by, there's also, like as you said, we're moving towards native implementations, but people are also going the other route now. So they're going progressive web apps that run on mobile, and so you don't actually have to download them from an app store. So we're seeing that. Also thinking of guerrilla tactics to get uPort distributed in China. So if anyone knows of any,
We'll talk later.
I mean, also for a lot of apps, the blockchain is just going to be a part of the app, right? So the app would be, you'll have the client, and you'll have the server, and you have this new thing that's the blockchain. So if the blockchain isn't essential for the use of the app, then it's not going to be a big deal, I think. I think Apple and Google will be okay with that. Yeah. And in terms of uPort, it's a wallet, so it's a bigger deal, right?
I think especially for the Apple iPhone store, you've got to think of the end user that they want to see in mind when you get your app approved. I don't know if you've run into rejected builds. I'm sure you have at some point, and we have for clients before. You just got to fix some things. They'll come back with a summary of to-dos for you. So I wouldn't be surprised if Apple next year is hiring more engineers and support to specifically deal with apps that are decentralized.
My personal feeling is that there is opportunity for more of the current apps on current app stores to implement blockchain type functions, either payments with tokens or other things into them. But I also think that blockchain could ultimately become sort of an existential threat to the app stores. Because what do app stores do? They basically offer a distribution mechanism and they handle payments. Well, it's blockchain. The payments are built into the thing. And if you can sort of decentralize the distribution mechanisms and reputation and discovery mechanisms like what uPort is doing, ultimately you won't need the app stores. So I think we're going to see a lot of movement in that area.
Question here?
Oh.
Question on this space is that recently there was the ICO of AppCoins and AppDuo was there, and it's being utilized as a distributed app store. The question pertaining to that was, right now feels like what iOS and apps were back in 2009 through 11. Steve Jobs suddenly got a bulb going on in his head. Initially he was reluctant to open it up to everyone. Now he suddenly opened it up, meaning in 2009. So, but of all those apps, 98-99% kind of failed for commercial reasons. In this case, there's a slight different way that even if 2 nodes are live, then it works. Best example is Dogecoin. It's a useless thing, but it still works because 2 nodes are alive and people transfer it. So there's no commits in the GitHub, but it still works because someone just deployed the code and it works. So in this space, do you see a remnant of this massive tail of apps which are just out there? That's number one. And second is, how do you prevent rogue apps from going in? Because iOS versus Android, that was always the question, that Android allowed everything without security checks, and that kind of maligned it. But when it came to iOS, it was much better in the security. So 2 questions. One is on quality, the second one. And the first one is that, would the apps ever die on these?
You already did. Many of them already did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, that's a big question, so let's take that in pieces. First of all, I like to call that era of the App Store the fart app era. I don't know if anyone was around, but there were like lots of these little, really like, hey, we can do stuff on a touchscreen or with a mic, right? And we're seeing a lot of those apps. We actually did some, our CTO, Jim Masdiar, did some deep analysis on actual application usage on the Ethereum blockchain. And we found, not surprisingly, the vast majority of activity is primarily wallet and distribution related and ICO related, token related. Really, in terms of actual app usage, there are a limited number of apps that are being used. And those apps usually fit into the category of, there are some gambling apps on there are some utilities, there are some backup apps, and there are tip me jars are actually a very popular activity on it. And there are some identity apps. I think uPort was up there too. Obviously, gaming is a new thing with CryptoKitties. But right now, the percentage of those application usage versus just sort of token transfers is very small. But we can already see that a single app like CryptoKitties can consume the entire Ethereum network. So we think that there's a huge opportunities for these apps to kind of grow and increase in volume. In terms of how these apps will naturally evolve, I think one of the beauties of blockchains are they are inherently market economies. So even though they don't truly disappear, the data on the blockchain is there. If it starts to not get used, people basically just will stop accessing it, and it will be less available, and it will get slower over time.
Yeah, I mean, as long as, if it's incentive, some people may just have incentives to just 51% attack it and just take it down at that point, because it's if you can't guarantee any security around the technology, then it's not really a blockchain anyway.
Great, thank you. One part of this panel, and one thing we want to focus on as a group, is building the community and growing it out. So I saw a lot of app developers here. How many of you have actually developed a mobile app? Great. Okay, so we had a lot of developers, not a lot of people that have tried to build something on mobile with blockchain. Do you guys, what do you think is a great place to start? What's a good resource to start looking at to start building mobile blockchain apps?
There are a couple. Obviously online resources and kind of reading documentation. Stack Exchange is a really good one. You know, with Ethereum, they have a lot of good resources in there, but it comes, I think, with familiarizing yourself on, you know, if you already know traditional app development for web, for mobile, for you know, a phone, that's great, but kind of easing into it. And honestly, like building something really silly and really small is every developer's, you know, hello world, right? Whether it's you rebuild, you know, right, where you press a button and it says something, or like a to-do app, really simple, really easy, but it's kind of, you know, a less ambitious way. I think a lot of people are ambitious when they're trying to build their first app. They want to build this grand idea, and it's like start with something small and work in your own weekly sprints and set small goals for yourself.
Yeah, and this isn't specific to mobile, but there's a tutorial called Crypto Zombies out there, which is just really great if you want to just get started and learn how to make smart contracts. Then the Truffle framework is also a good place to start. Yeah, I would start there.
And here's a plug. So we're coming out with a mobile SDK to make accessing the blockchain from native mobile apps easy. So we haven't released it yet. We're actually building it with Microsoft for something. And so basically it will enable you to just, from a mobile app, like you onboard to an app today, except instead of registering and creating an identity on a server, you create it on Ethereum. That helps you manage the user's private keys and sign transactions and do some fueling of the transaction in the background, so end users don't need to worry about Ether or any of those other usability hurdles.
I would be kind of gearing up our upcoming demo if I talked about it now, but we'll show you some interesting things around mobile development on our Strava platforms.
Thank you. All right, guys, thank you so much with that. I think it's, I want to leave a few minutes for the audience to ask any questions that you haven't already. Otherwise, we're going to close up the panel and we're going to move on to a demonstration. Brock?
So where do you guys see, because now we're seeing security issues with Meltdown and Spectra. When you're talking about hardware before, then you have security issues with just in the coding of the languages, now with just smart contracts, but now on the mobile app itself, maybe can get hacked. So where do you guys see in the future, talking about predicting the future, where are the biggest pain points that you foresee? Because now we have hardware, software, coding languages, everything that could potentially be hacked. What do you guys see as the biggest issues?
There are a lot of issues, and I guess so. It's always just a prioritization of some things. I think like I had someone ask me at a panel last night. It's like, or their question was related to security risks of infecting 51% of the Ethereum nodes with some virus, and I was like maybe that could happen, but like, you know, there are a lot of problems that happens besides uPort. So, so for us, you know, like we focus on the main things is like our big assumptions are device manufacturers are going to build correct secure enclaves, because that's like where the root of trust lives. And blockchain networks in general are only as decentralized as their keys are, as access is the right permissions to that network. And so sort of it comes to me always down to that there's the hardware and the tech, but then it's always the social, sort of designing the experience around that key. So to sort of blend the social worlds and the tech worlds into some better management of that.
And I think one area that we're really seeing is coming to the fore with security is around right now the disconnect between, you know, the logic that exists in smart contracts on the blockchain, which is secure, and then the front ends that are being used to access them. I mean, Ernst & Young recently released a report that approximately 10% of all funds raised in ICOs are stolen via those sort of phishing front-end attacks. So, you know, that's an immense amount of value that's being diverted somewhere else that's not intended to. So that's one area I think that's really coming up fast and furious.
I also see it as like a supply and demand issue, right? There's no system is secure, truly secure. So you're going to see higher rewards for bug bounty programs, just increased security. You know, outside of blockchain development, I personally think healthcare and cybersecurity are two areas that are always going to have businesses being created and kind of chasing the frontier of what it means to be secure, whether that's your company or database or whatever it might be. So with higher stakes, you're going to have higher rewards for programs from independent auditors, third parties, everything to make sure anything you're building is safe.
Great. Thank you. And we'll take one more question. There's one back there. Thank you.
Hi. You know, part of the initial appeal of cryptocurrencies was anonymity, which you haven't mentioned at all tonight. What is the role of anonymity going forward, especially on mobile apps? And I mean, what do you see?
So, good question. It seems like a lot more people are talking about privacy this month than there were last month, which is a good thing. And anonymity was one of the perceived benefits of a blockchain, but that was only because addresses weren't human readable, right? It's like as anonymous as this address that you're acting on behalf of. And so there was anonymity when everyone got Bitcoins by mining them. So there was no KYC and onboarding, offboarding ramps. But sort of once you de-anonymize the first bit of that, then you can basically correlate the entire blockchain. So it's like the blockchain is as anonymous, or at least Ethereum was, or early Bitcoin was, as all the participants are. And as soon as one becomes known, you can look at who they've interacted with publicly and sort of expose the entire history. And that there's things that you can do to increase privacy and maybe even get towards anonymity, which can really only be achieved if you're starting to generate pairwise identifiers. Like, I'm creating a specific identity just to use with you for this one instance, and I throw it away, like a single-use phone number. That's the only way you can really generate anonymity, and if you do that in a way that you don't positively correlate it with any other on-chain activity. So it's a long-winded way of saying there may be other blockchains that emerge that guarantee anonymity or that have anonymous transactions, but there probably needs to be a lot of tech development for any of the big mainstream ones today to do it.
Yeah, on that note, I just wanted to add that I actually think sometimes the focus on privacy actually is hampering the adoption of actual blockchain applications. So if you notice blockchain applications that are actually known and in use, the developers of those applications are very public. And I think the reason for that, like uPort or Gnosis or CryptoKitties, and the reason for that is, if I'm transferring value, I want to know someone legitimately created that application. So I think you have privacy in terms of individual account balances, these kind of things. But in terms of actual blockchain applications, I think you want to know who actually created them so you can build that trust. And we have to kind of create better identity and reputation systems to improve that trust over time.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you so much to the panel.
Maybe she
Just a
follow-up?
Go for it. Yeah.
I mean, just to follow up on that, we still kind of, or you guys are still sort of holding on to the idea of, or I guess the kabuki of privacy when you say something like, well, we're still going to have private keys. I mean, why even bother if you're going to, let's say, you're building an identity, project where everything about you is on your phone. So why bother with things like private keys or, I don't know, you guys are still holding on to those things, right? So why bother?
Well, it's only if we can do something and censor you or delete you. And so in some ways, when I think of an identity, it's just this sort of a phone number or a string of characters. And there's this whole web of data around it known as credentials. And some of those are privately stored locally on the user's device in their secure enclave, along with their private keys stored there. And then there's public data on chain based on the actions they've taken and the things that other people have claimed about them publicly. And the data that's stored in the secure location, we sort of are only using the secure environment on the user's smartphone because it's basically like a secure hardware wallet. And not even Apple or the device manufacturers have access to the root in the enclave. And so you can use this storage as sort of self-sovereign because only me, the user that has set a device password that gets into the root of the device, can access that data. And so Apple nor any other provider can censor or delete. And so if the whole system comes down, as long as Ethereum is still running and you haven't lost your phone, then you can still recover your identity, and there's no way anyone can take that information away from you.
I hate to say this when we're the pioneers of self-sovereign identity is unfounded, but plug for uPort, which is that, this idea of right now your data exists, but it's controlled by other companies. You don't control it. So why bother? The answer is that one of the reasons is we want to put that control back in the individual's hands. Now, there are many ways that we are approaching to do this, but if you can control your own information, it kind of changes the paradigm of how all the applications we interact with will work. So that's one of the reasons we focus.
But without anonymity, how do you control it? Why aren't you data mined? I mean, once you lose the anonymity, then everybody knows what you're doing, and I don't get that.
Yeah,
It
I
doesn't
think.
compute to me.
Yeah,
It's like, how does that make it different from anything else that's happening on the web?
If I can kind of present some options, there are systems that are using more what is now the coined word opaque transactions. So they're coming up with just ways to transact that is a little bit a different style of identity that's being managed. There are chains that are just using different ways of completing these transactions. I think Monero, Zcash, Grincoin, which is coming out in a little bit, will be another one of those projects. It's being managed in different ways, and I think that to the ends of using some of the applications and user experiences that we're used to in the general use cases, such as like an iOS app that has a profile, you may want to have something that has less anonymity to it so that you can manage that. That has a longer log of who's transacted with whom. I think that each chain has different answers to the things that we're looking for. And that's kind of the beauty of the space at this time, at this really nascent, new time.
I'd be happy to answer more, because I think there are many ways we can address, but probably we can take it offline.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I just want to thank, number one, the audience for the questions, so thank you for taking the time to ask these questions, for being here, and thank you to the panel for providing us with your insight and information. Next up, we're going to move into a demonstration of some of the newest features of Strato. And for that, I'm just going to ask my colleague, Dustin, our senior engineer, to come up and take over. And Victor is going to work with him to provide this demonstration for us. Nice.
Okay, so I got to stretch for a second.
Woo!
A lot of questions about how do you build applications, blockchain applications for mobile, right? So one of the things about BlockApps is we were the first blockchain as a service company. We launched that entire category with Microsoft about 2 years ago at DevCon 1. We also implemented the first commercial implementation of Ethereum, and we're one of the founders of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. So we've gotten a chance to see companies in all different sectors, ranging from startups to Fortune 500s, on how they use blockchain technology and what kind of applications they want to build. And really, we've seen two things change in the blockchain space. Up to now, you may have heard a lot about private or permissioned blockchains and public blockchains. And these are kind of split in the middle, and they're not really interacting with each other. There are solutions on one side and solutions on the other side. What we've seen from all these companies that we work with and developers that we work with is people are wanting to build hybrid solutions, where parts of it, kind of to your privacy question, exists on private blockchains, and parts of it exists on public blockchains. The second thing that we're seeing is that people want these applications that cross these private-public gaps to actually be mobile first. They want them to run easily on mobile phones because that's the way most of us experience the web. You know, the vast majority of mobile internet usage is on mobile devices. This is particularly stark in places like Asia, Africa, and South America, where people don't buy computers at all anymore. They just simply go directly to phones because that's where you can get the fastest internet usage, and the devices are flexible enough to handle the range of applications. So I'm very happy today to talk about the newest addition to our Strato platform, which we call Strato Public. Strato Public is designed to bridge this gap between the Strato private blockchain as a service implementations that we've created and allow these parties to interact in a seamless manner in what will be the first mobile-first architected blockchain that will be available on the market. And with that, I'm going to show you the technology and hand it over to Dustin. Go for it.
Thanks, Victor. So here are three links that we have where you could actually tune in and play along with the raffle app that we're about to show. There we go. All right. So what we're actually going to demonstrate now is deploying a dApp onto the Strato testnet and then interacting with it. And so I'll show how to do that. So here is our Strato management dashboard. This is where you get a lot of the information about our blockchain. You have this tab down here that says apps. So if you want to deploy an app, as you can see, we already have this charity raffle deployed. You're going to come over here, press deploy. And when you set up an account on Strato, you'll be able to supply your username, user address, your password. And then you'll have pre-built an app bundle that's going to be zipped together, and you're going to drop it here. And so actually, what does this app bundle look like? You help me get a...
Yeah.
Sorry, he's a Linux user, so.
It's on the command line, Joey's contributing.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. So the app bundle itself actually looks like this, where you have a metadata.json file, which just includes the information about the app, yourself, the company, the versioning. It has a static folder where all the static HTML, JSON, JavaScript files are hosted, the static index.html file, and a contracts folder where all of your smart contracts are held. So now going back to our Strato management dashboard, if we press upload, we'll actually deploy this dApp to our testnet. But since we've already uploaded it, we can see it right here. It's ready to launch. And actually, once you launch it to the testnet, it's distributed to every node on the network. So it doesn't matter which node you're connecting it to. You can use the dApp from wherever.
And just to highlight, the reason we created this app bundle is to answer the question that came up earlier about vulnerabilities in the UI layer. Because these are now bundled together, we can actually confirm that the UI that you're interacting with is connected and what the developer wants to see.
So coming to this mobile simulator, we're actually going to open it up, and it's going to take us to a node that we have on our network, to this dApp store page that we have. And so you can see that the charity raffle is ready to be viewed. But first we need to create a user account to actually log in and interact with it. So I'm going to create a new account for myself. I'll just call it Dustin1234. I'm going to create a super secret password. And then that's it. I press create account, and we'll see a little green bar come across the front.
Oh, you use that username already.
Oh, I should use a different one. There we go.
Very secure.
Green bar across the top means it's working. And so after it's been created, log in. Use the same password as before.
Does anyone have a favorite charity that they like, that they would like to support? Coin Center. Anyone else? Sorry, what?
The Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Gates Foundation. Yeah. So, thank you for that suggestion. Hey, can we give this person a BlockApps T-shirt for giving us a good idea?
All right, so we're gonna hand out 100 tickets for this.
Right here. Right here.
Thanks a lot.
This is a medium, and it doesn't, barely fits me, so.
Double XL, do you have it?
We do in the back.
Do a coin swap later.
We do,
A
yeah.
t-shirt
Yeah.
swap later.
Yes.
Awesome.
We'll tokenize it and swap it later with you.
So we're gonna start with 100 tickets, and we're gonna make each ticket cost 50 tokens. That way no one can buy up the whole lottery or the whole raffle and win it themselves. And how much should we give to the charity?
Yeah. Who's feeling generous? What's the percentage of the overall ticket sales that we should give back to the charity? 100. Wow. Okay. Very generous. Anyone else slightly less generous?
45%.
It's unanimous?
2%.
All right. So now we'll just go ahead and press submit.
Yep.
We'll enter our raffle into the pool. We've got our wonderful green line across the top, and here we go. Gates Foundation raffle ready to go. 5,000 coin jackpot. All of it's going to charity. And again, this raffle is distributed on the blockchain, and so this can be accessed from any node. So we'll go ahead and enter the raffle. Again, my username and address are pre-populated, so all I have to do is enter my password and enter number of tickets. I'm going to go ahead and buy 10 tickets. That's going to cost me 500 tokens. That's like half of what I was given. So I'm going to go ahead and play. And so again, this is initiating a transaction on the blockchain, and as soon as that gets confirmed, we can actually see the remaining tickets have gone down to 90. I bought 10% of the pot, and so if people bought the rest of them, we would actually be able to see who wins, which we can do if we go back to
Someone's already trying to spam our raffle app.
You can actually see here
It is blockchain after all. So.
that on Strato Demo 2, our raffle contract that we have uploaded, fake gates, someone has come in and swiped us.
Phishing attacks
We
never
are
cease on the
Getting
blockchain.
tons of raffles. All right. This is us, Gates Raffle Foundation. As you can see, we can see the state of our contract, which is pretty awesome. We can see that we're giving all of it to charity. Each ticket that we buy shows up as an entry in this array. And so we can see that I bought the first 10, but then some people have come in and bought more after me. But we actually don't have a winner yet. So if all the tickets get bought up, then this winner address will be able to tell us who won the raffle. And all the funds will get distributed to that address at the end.
All the funds of zero.
Yes.
That's right, all the funds
will get sent back to the charity.
So
Go ahead.
that's actually about the end of our demo for right now.
Yes.
So we'll open it up for questions.
And with that, thank you for your patience. And if you do want to try this app, again, this is in early beta, as you can tell, maybe alpha. And if you want to try this, go to blockapps.net/demo1 or demo 2 or demo 3. And each of them will allow you to participate on different blockchain nodes. So any questions about Strato Public Law? Yes?
Can you elaborate more on how do you do these smart contracts? Like, is it right away, or what kind of coding is required?
Yeah, so basically, currently on Strato Public, we support Solidity, which is the standard most popular smart contract coding language. And that will be sort of embedded in that app bundle as part of that overall app bundle. Any other questions? Yes?
What was the hardest part about building a whole public blockchain?
Oh, it's easy. You snap your fingers and it happens. I think the biggest part about building a new public blockchain is to really think about who are the participants and the incentive models. Blockchains, one really thing that's really important about public blockchains and blockchains in general is that you really have to think through the token incentives and how the different participants would likely interact together, and that everyone is properly incentivized to participate. Yes?
Is it ERC20 based or any correlation to Ethereum?
Yes, so it is not ERC20 based. It will be a completely new blockchain because it is basically a new architecture. We are taking the core pieces of Ethereum, like the EVM and Solidity, and allowing that to kind of run on this overall architecture. Yes, in the back.
Can you comment on the interaction between like a permission chain and your public chain?
Yes, so one of the things that we've seen here is that we ran it on the public chain, but you can actually take the exact same app that we just wrote there and launch it to a permission chain using the exact same technology. So we've kind of standardized the development model between those two things. Now, you can also, and we're still working on this particular pieces, but you can also create what we call blockchain services, which are kind of like oracles that exist across chains. So let's say you have an app on the public chain that you want information from a private permission chain that you have. Those can crosstalk to each other and interact to form the logic that you want. Any more questions? Thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you try it out. Please give us feedback on our Slack or our Twitter. We'd love to get more information, and we'd love to create great mobile blockchain experiences with you.